And welcome to the Outside 50 podcast brought to you by usfootynews.com. And as normal, on the other end of the line is Rick Shaibani. How, Rick?
How you doing, Kraz?
Yeah, good.
Good. Same here. Or as well as we can be at the moment. Again, most people here are still on lockdown, and again, just a lot of unprecedented stuff going on in the world right now. But right now, we are doing a little vignette or a little editorial episode. There are going to be some changes coming to the Outside 50 podcast. But before we get on to that, I really just wanted to say thank you on behalf of myself and Kraz. We've had over 1,000 downloads of the podcast as of right now, 15 episodes. We have people who are tuning in, hundreds of people in the US, in Australia, as far away as, I think, Lithuania, Ecuador, Chile, the UK. It's really amazing just seeing how much it's grown in a short period of time. And we just want to say thank you to everyone who's tuned in, who's subscribed, who's downloaded episodes. We genuinely appreciate it, and it's been a really fun journey.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And I know we've both learned a lot in the little process that we've been going through, and never having done this, either of us done this before. It's certainly been fun, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And, thank you to all our guests that we've had on already. I'm not going to name you all, but nearly 20 people from all walks of life in the USAFL, basically, that we've had on, from umpires and presidents to people who are starting new teams, people who have been around teams for a long time, people with some experience in Australia playing the game. So it's been really fun to connect to people, a broad range of people as well. And I've really enjoyed that. People were, sometimes we just glance over their social media posts without really getting to know them. And we've learned some pretty good things about some people. So it's been a really enjoyable couple of months so far.
Yeah, it really has. And again, it was something where, it was kind of uncharted territory for both of us. No one had really done it. There are a few other footy-themed podcasts that are being done here in the States. But again, this is just kind of uncharted waters. And we were happy to just get a good audience and bring on some great guests. And as of right now, the main issue, and this is kind of heading towards the real point of the episode, we've run into some issues with the USAFL not officially recognizing or sponsoring or approving of the podcast. So why don't you give a little more in-depth intro on that, Kraz, so everyone knows what's happening?
Yeah, it's been, I've gone through the gamut of emotions over the last couple of days. Rick and I, we've been filling a space really that's been empty for a long time. And this opportunity right now, came up several months ago, right before our whole world pandemic was probably making the news. And we thought an opportunity to fill a space to be able to talk to people around the country. We had reached out to the USAFL about partnering about this previously on 2 times, and those conversations went nowhere. And since that time, and we'd put out 15 episodes, and we basically have been totally ignored by the USAFL, even though Rick has been in footy for several years now over there in LA and started down there in Phoenix, has spent a whole year down in Australia furthering his football career and his knowledge. I've been around for 20 years. I've been part of the Atlanta club all that time, either a coach or a player, and also started another team here in Rome, Georgia, in the Northwest, where I now live. So to say it's been disappointing, it has to be a massive understatement. But following on from that as well, we've seen some very arbitrary content come out of the USAFL over the last 18 months. We think it's sort of come to a head now that the USAFL have decided to build their own podcast. It's been a slap in the face. So, it's been a pretty tumultuous last few days. So,
Yeah, and it was something where it seemed, like you said, Kraz, arbitrary. Like, there were two different sets of standards for people. And, you know, with Brian Barish starting his own podcast, that's basically a ripoff of what we've been doing. And, you know, again, being given the cold shoulder on social media, or not being communicative with our concerns or our issues with issues related to the USAFL as a whole, or just with the podcast exposure to begin with. We feel like we've just been ignored at every turn. And obviously, you know, there are two sides to every story, and plenty of people might defend what they're doing, but we genuinely feel like we aren't being given a fair go in terms of overall exposure and publicity.
Yeah, you know, we've poured backwards and forwards about this over, you know, not only just in the past week since we heard about the USAFL podcast coming out on top of ours, but you know, previous to that, we've done 15 episodes and they've been basically ignored, and probably 90% of the players and administrators here in the USAFL probably don't even know we exist. And all we are doing is talking about the USAFL, its teams, its players, its admins, and things like that. So we stepped up to the plate and we contacted together the USAFL administration to start and ask some questions. Why is the USAFL media production so arbitrary? Why is it so biased towards the AFL and the AFLW platforms when we have 45 teams here in the country and 50 plus clubs? We were just asking questions and we wanted to know why, obviously, that was the case, and why we weren't perhaps being given a voice that we believe, obviously, that was valid. And I did actually speak personally with the president of the USAFL, Seb Aguilari, and we chatted for 45 minutes prior to this podcast. And the basic explanation that I got from Seb was they, as a board, knew about the podcast. I believe most of the board had listened to it, but for some unknown reason, they had not recommended that it be published or shared or liked or even commented on. In fact, we haven't even received one email from anyone on the board to say what we were doing is benefiting the growth of the USAFL and footy in general in the US. So we've tried to do the right thing. The caveat here is, though, and full disclosure, the Outside 50 podcast is sponsored by a business that I own, Play Aussie USA, and I import Aussie Rules football, Sharon footballs exclusively to the US, and that is where the funding for this program it has been coming from, basically out of sales of the footballs to the general public here in the US and to the players around the country. But the business is also a sponsor of the USAFL, and that puts me personally in a very, very bad place, backed into a corner.
Yeah, and we both felt like it was a rock and a hard place type of situation, especially for you, Kraz. I mean, for those of our listeners who don't know, he's a life member of the USAFL, and that loyalty is a huge thing, especially in a country where the game isn't played. And you know, it's not just due to our hard work, but to the hard work of lots of people who aren't recognized. And it's definitely not all about us either. Craig Wessels, who does the Yank on the Footy podcast, we've mentioned him in a few previous episodes. He's not affiliated with the USAFL. So, I mean, therefore, there aren't going to be any hard feelings if they give him the cold shoulder. But when it comes to us, in terms of covering USAFL news and events and having on different guests, the USAFL is just acting like we need their magical rubber stamp of approval. And it's something where, personally, none of us feel that the USAFL should have a monopoly on who can talk about footy, who can't, and where they can do it from and what they can talk about. So the way we see it is that, you know, we're just, again, there's two different sets of rules, and we were just, for some reason, we're just not being given that exposure that would really help. And I think it's great that we've gotten the support that we do have. There are many, many people out there, and not going to name names, but you all know who you are. You guys have supported this podcast since day one, and we're very grateful for you guys. And more than anything, kind of validated our position. You know, people saying or people agreeing with us that the USAFL isn't being fair, that they're not taking advantage of what's great publicity for the sport, and they're doing it on very arbitrary means. It's something where I think anyone would be upset or disappointed.
Yeah, you were right, Rick, about it being arbitrary and disappointing. To me personally, and let me say this clearly, it's not about being in competition or whether someone can do something better. The USAFL pays the media manager. It's a paid position on their board of management. So, to any player or club that's listening, your player and club fees are going towards social media production and the production of a podcast, which is basically to us a duplication of what we're doing. What a total waste of our resources, not only on our part, but also on the part of the USAFL. Perhaps if more people stood up and asked why, then maybe something would be changed. As an admin of two clubs, I am blown away by this waste of player and club fees and also the waste of our efforts for little. But as you said at the top of the show, Rick, we're going to make some changes, and some of them hopefully will even benefit the USAFL further, or the development of footy further. I'm going to be moving away from this podcast and going to be handing it and usfootynews.com over to Rick. And Rick is going to manage that, and whatever team he puts together is moving forward, is up to him. And I'm going to move on to a different project, another one that I'm passionate about, and something to do with my the business that I run, Play Aussie USA, or playaussie.com if you wanted to look it up today, and and move forward and take this as just a fork in the road as we move on. And like I said, I am a sponsor of the USAFL, and I'm going to stay loyal to them. I'm still going to be playing the games. There's still going to be people still going to play games and enjoy meeting people in the USAFL. But also, I'm going to tone down what I do administratively for the game. I've been in this game 20 years. I've been um, administrating the Atlanta team in some form for 17, 18 years of that. And it's time to take a bit of a step back, perhaps, and do some other things and concentrate on what's important. And my small business is important to me because it does provide a very small livelihood for me and in these hard times. With that business, as I said, I sponsor the USAFL, but I've also donated close to $2,000 worth of footballs to clubs around the country for various projects, fundraising activities. That's sort of another slap in the face that here I am trying to support the game as much as possible. That my family and my friends around me is what's important. So, not all's bad's coming out of this, Rick, and we're going to move on and perhaps be even bigger and better.
Yeah, and as we've said already, it's not all doom and gloom. I'm still going to be involved with the podcast as well as other U.S. footy news miscellaneous upkeep and management as needed, and I'm excited about that. And again, we're going to keep the podcast going. I've already reached out to a few people. No official announcements yet, of course, but talking to a few people who are definitely keen, who are definitely interested in helping however they can, whether it's being a co-host or just sort of, I don't know, providing logistical support. So again, we're very grateful for that. We really have been overwhelmed in terms of how many people really appreciate what we're doing. The feedback we've gotten has been overwhelmingly positive, which again adds to the frustration that the USAFL apparently can't seem to see that. And again, it is what it is. But moving forward, we do have some exciting things happening. Again, I'm talking to a bunch of different people, and so the future is bright. We're definitely going to be back in the near future. I can't say how long a hiatus is going to be if there is one, but stay tuned, and we'll be sure to announce the new co-hosts, or I will be doing that in the near future. So stay tuned.
Yeah, we still have one little, well, it's not a little episode in the can, as they say, Rick, which will come out in a day or two.
Yeah.
And it's somewhat of an ironic group of people, which I think everyone should listen to. It was probably my favorite podcast, and I'm not saying that from all the previous guests, but I had some friends who go back a long time in US footy, and without letting the cat out of the bag too much, it was probably the one I had the most fun on and enjoyed the most. And that'll come out in the next couple of days, and then after that next week, Rick will be running the show, and I may drop in occasionally and say g'day, and you'll see maybe in a couple of weeks the other project that I've got on my plate at the moment, and we'll go on from there. But as I said, all good. We're cool about it now, and we've talked about it so much over the last 5 or 6 days that we can see some positive come out of it, and that is the growth, some further growth of footy around the US, and developing the game and getting new teams going, helping the current teams spread the word, and having a kick ourselves, because that's what we love to do, don't we?
Absolutely. And yeah, Kraz, you're always welcome back on whenever you feel up to it. And yeah, again, the future is bright. There's a lot of stuff that we have on the table, and a lot of people who are really going out of their way to just put their hand up and get involved. So we're very grateful for that.
Yeah, so if you're listening in on this, if you wanted to contact Rick, you can do so on the same email address, which is usfootynews@gmail.com, and touch base with him if you'd like to come on, even to help, like he said, with some of the other logistical parts of the podcast production, or to be a co-host occasionally. That would be great. And Rick's a great guy, and has a lot of experience in a couple of other fields, which could be of great benefit to the to footy here in the US, and hopefully he gets involved in some of those in the coming months as well. And we see all the fruits of his experience and expertise.
Yep, that's the plan. And again, we're always grateful and appreciative of the people who help out either directly or indirectly. So again, the future is bright, and I think this is just a chance to turn the page and get some new ideas, some new people, and just keep on plugging away at it.
Totally agree, Rick. Take care, mate. We'll talk to you soon.
Likewise. Take care.